Well, welcome one and all to the stream. It is I, Captain Steve, and today, chums, we're looking at how No Man's Sky was made, and it's going back to 2015. So this is prior to release. I believe this is going back to GDC 2015. Let me put it on the screen. I'll show you what I'm going to be showing. And basically, I'm going to be playing the video, pausing it at regular intervals and giving commentary. And I did one just the other day, really. But after it's all published, I'd link them together. But they are in a playlist as well. Anyway, welcome, Scott Gus. Thank you for being first into the house, chum. So Scott Gus does modded gameplay of No Man's Sky, an awesome channel to watch. We've got Warfy in the house. Hello there, Warfy. Welcome, welcome, Warfy. And we've also got Assistant No Man's Sky, who makes the mobile phone app. If you haven't got the mobile phone app, head on over to his channel. You'll find details on how to get it. But it's on all platforms, and I'll be lost without it. It's freaking awesome. Right. Anyhow, let's show you on screen what I'm looking at. So hit our podcast mode. There we go. So down here, we've got the read all. I don't know whether you can see this because it's very small, but it says, in this GDC 2015 talk, Hello Games' Grant Duncan explains the design process for creating the artwork of No Man's Sky. So let's jump on in, let's give it a watch. And yes, like I said, I'll be doing regular pauses and we'll be talking about it. So let's hit play. And let's hope you guys can hear this okay. I'll turn it right up there. Let's hit play.
Okay, first of all, before I begin, could I see a show of hands? How many artists are here?
Yeah, I am, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many of you wish you were stood here in front of all these people looking right at you?
If it meant I worked at Hello Games, yeah, count me in. Yeah, I'll be up there.
So, my name's Grant Duncan. I'm the art director at Hello Games.
Hello, Grant Duncan.
We're a very tiny little indie studio in England.
Not so much anymore. I've grown a bit now.
I'm very aware that I shouldn't be here right now because I'm working on a game called No Man's Sky. And the reason I shouldn't really be here is because, first of all, the game's not finished. It's always a little bit strange talking about things like art on a title that's not finished. And obviously, the fact I'm here means the game is not getting finished, and so it's getting delayed and all this kind of thing. But I've been to GDC in the past few years, and I'm one of those people that always moans about there's not enough art talks, there's too many tech talks, everyone's talking about free-to-play and all that incredibly boring stuff. So when they asked me to come, I couldn't really say no, so I'm going to talk about No Man's Sky. So No Man's Sky is a science fiction game, and it's all about that kind of feeling of discovery and about exploring the unknown. It's that kind of feeling that you had when you were a kid and you'd go to the beach and you'd be surrounded by sand dunes and you wouldn't know what is over the next hill, or you'd find a rock pool and you'd go poking it with a stick and a little crab would crawl out, and everything was new and everything was exciting. And it's inspired by fantastic artwork like this. Science fiction covers from the 70s. And why I love this is because it's not, it's not a great piece of artwork, but it's really weird.
It's very awe-inspiring. I mean, you can see that they took inspiration from some of this on some of the relics that we have on our planets now. I love these mountain ranges. And this even appeared on some of his cover work that he did for the game. But I don't think we get mountain ranges that are quite as spiky or as angular as that. We get ones that are straight up like that, but I don't think I've seen them on a slant, sharding up into the sky like that. And what's this? God, trying to kick a freaking goal over that would be a frickin' time and a half, wouldn't it? But then again, what's the gravity like on that planet? Who knows? Not that gravity really plays a part in No Man's Sky all that much. Hello there, Atlas Galacticus and Sexual Tyrannosaurus and Adam Mack. Welcome into the chat, people. Yeah, I'm reading the names from down here. You can see everybody that came into the live chat down here if you're watching this back. Heck yes.
What are they doing? Who are those guys? Is that like some kind of jacuzzi? I don't really know. The perspective's all off.
I love the rivers.
Some kind of blue water, orange mountains, but it's just, you just wouldn't have this these days. Nobody would buy a book with this on the cover anymore. If games had this kind of artwork, I don't know if it'd sell many copies, which is a bit worrying since I'm working on a game with this kind of artwork.
It's quite funny. Yeah, it's
so I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about, just kind of being self-indulgent, talking about my favorite sci-fi
Chris
artist.
Foss.
This is a guy called Chris Foss.
He's got a YouTube channel.
This is actually some of the first sci-fi books that I got into. The main reason I got into it is because they had one of these cool three-way covers which just means I'm guaranteed to buy all 3 because of my OCD, and I just need to have them arranged perfectly on the shelf. So anyone who's played Homeworld, you'll look at these ships and you'll realize that they were clearly inspired by the same kind of artwork that's inspired me. And what's great about Chris Foss is that he actually began his career as an erotic artwork creator. I think he worked for Penthouse.
Did he?
Illustrated The Joy of Sex. And apparently his understanding of the female anatomy is what's led to him creating such incredible designs.
Did not know that.
This is a perfect example of sci-fi art. It's like, what even is this? That's water, is it clouds? I don't know, but it's absolutely incredible to me. Like, I can't even imagine what it must feel like to go to bed after you've just created that piece of artwork. I don't think I'd be able to sleep. This is another one. What I really love about him is he created this kind of art when everyone else was creating black star fields, grey, dull, monolithic spacecraft. And he'd created this, and people loved it. And I can't imagine somebody just taking that kind of risk and just doing something so different to what everyone else is doing. And I think that's why he's one of my favorite artists. This is another guy, John Harris. He's a little bit different.
Now you can see the inspiration for the monoliths and the portals and the angular lines. I mean, look at this. Pretty darn freaking epic, isn't it? That is pretty darn cool. I mean, Chris Foss, I mean, that's probably where they got the inspiration of having the coloured nebulas. It's very rare now that I jump to a system in space and go, oh, well, you're like taken aback and go, wow, that nebula's freaking colourful, that's beautiful. The nebulas in No Man's Sky are great.
He is quite formulaic in that he'll have, it's always a sort of flat horizon line, but he just has, like the image on the left, that could be Kenya, you know, those trees, that could work, but then you've got this giant building. Like, how big is that building? It doesn't even make any sense. The same on the right, like those people are so tiny, it's just the size of that planet, it wouldn't even work, but it's just sci-fi and it's just beautiful. And what I like about these is that these vessels, they could be military vessels. They're kind of bristling with what could be guns or lasers of some sort, but it's the softness that he kind of gets with his brush strokes, and it just...
Now, on that previous slide where you had the ringed planets just hanging in the horizon, we didn't get ring planets at launch. Ring planets didn't appear till a few years after launch, and now they're appearing now. But you know, you can see from these early artistic impressions, some of these things that we're seeing here, it's like that freighter that's on screen right now. It looks almost like a space whale, doesn't it? It looks really quite cool. These sort of things are slowly coming into iteration, so they're still looking at these key pieces of art and still moving things into game, like the ringed planets and like some of the structures that we're seeing. It's like the archive buildings. The archive buildings, I'm sure, have taken some inspiration from this too. So what are we looking for here, people, inside of these videos? There's still things that might actually appear in No Man's Sky in the coming future, you know?
God, I can't even talk, it's so good. But like, the green he's using on the left is just, everyone else is using black in space. He's done a giant green space, and that blows my mind. Another one who's slightly more unusual, but I think every artist in this room probably loves this guy, and we were all gutted when he died a few years ago.
Look at that, riding on giant winged animals. You know, Meogi's made that happen. Thank you very much, Meogi, by bringing in the creatures into the verse. But you know, this is happening now. Taming of pets and flying them around. This guy's got a companion right next to him right there. Only just come into iteration. Some of this sort of nested planet stuff has only really started coming into iteration. This looks like a nested planet, but it'd be nice to have even more of this sort of wondrous stuff going on, wouldn't it? I mean, some of this flora is freaking inspiring. Heck yes it is. It looks like there's a relic down there as well. So you can see where they got a lot of the inspiration from, and I'm loving watching this. It's really cool. And I get to watch it with you guys too. Well, hello there, Dave. Welcome. And Sazable in the house.
But Mobius, he kind of walks that line between science fiction and fantasy. What I love about it is that it's a place you want to be. So much science fiction, especially in games, they're these horrible post-apocalyptic war zones, and there's not really, everyone's just trying to kill each other in different ways, and every game that's set in science fiction universes seems to be like, you're in this amazing world and you can kill each other there, and you're in this spaceship and you kill each other here, and there's something about Mobius's work that nobody's killing each other. They probably could if they wanted to, but they're not, and I find that quite refreshing. And things like this where they're kind of whales, but they're also sharks. I don't know if they're underwater, but it's just filled with questions, and you want to know the history. You want to know, like, that guy's on like a flying duck pterodactyl. You want to know what they're doing. There's diplodocus snails.
Hopefully that's made it a bit sharper.
You want to fly down. You want to understand what those creatures are and what they're doing. And this image is just classic sci-fi. It's a little man and some kind of giant, interesting thing, and that.
Now, yeah, if we could do with crystal biomes, Hello Games. I mean, yeah, some of your actual early gameplay footage showed crystal biomes. Please add them into game, because they'd be awesome places to go just to get a load of harvestable parts, like condensed carbon. You need condensed carbon for so much, and iridium as well. So yeah, or dihydrogen, I should say. Stick it all on one planet. Loads and loads of different colours of crystals, including the sodium crystals, the yellow ones. That'd be really quite gnarly to have a planet just with mixed freaking crystal shards everywhere. Especially if you do manage to pull off ray tracing and you improve your crystals and the light refractions. Heck yes, that'd be freaking immense.
It's just something I've been doing far too much in No Man's Sky and getting away with murder. And I didn't really want to include Ralph because it's almost too predictable, but you can't pretend that Ralph McQuarrie wasn't a huge influence. Like his work on Star Wars and like X-Wings, TIE Fighters. It's that thing that all great artwork has, especially art direction wise, where everything fits together and it just is coherent. And even though the ships and the universe,
I'd say a lot of the new base parts have taken a lot of inspiration from Ralph McQuarrie, especially where it comes with all of the ones that look like that, basically. There's the stone parts. They look very much in keeping to that, or a little bit like what we see in Mandalorian. Welcome, Dad's Game Time. Another awesome content creator in the house there, people. Eugene Carr. Welcome, Eugene Carr. Awesome. I'm going to carry on playing this.
They're different and they're not like our universe. You don't question it, you just accept it. And this is some of the work that's not as well known, but he just has that same sort of fantasy, sci-fi softness. And I think this was one of Ralph McQuarrie's favourite pieces, which just has, it could be Earth, but you've got twin suns, you've got a mysterious alien landscape. So to me, science fiction, it's not about war, it's about that feeling of the frontier, that feeling of adventure. It's not post-apocalyptic, it's exciting, it's full of hope. I also thought Star Trek, even though I've never been a massive fan, it had that, humanity had done okay. We'd managed to get to a place where we just had wonderful technology and there was wars going on, there were enemies, but as a species we were doing really well, and it was a place you wanted to be. And another inspiration for No Man's Sky is this book, which I read when I was a tiny little kid, and it's great. It's that classic adventure sort of thing where you've got, if you look at the cover, what are we seeing? We've got a pterodactyl in the sky, we've got adventurers taking photographs, we've got iguanodon in the center there, stegosaurus, but if you look up in the tree, some kind of wild Tarzan man. In the bottom left, we've got angry natives, and if you look in the very middle, you can see this like a giant alligator fighting some kind of
plesiosaur
fish. And I love that, and it's just books like this and movies that came around at the same time, Journey to the Center of the Earth, adventurers, explorers, going off into the unknown.
Now, he went a bit quick there, didn't he? Didn't stay on that screen long, Mr. Grant Duncan, but look at this. That looks exactly like what the Nautilus looks like that we've actually got into iteration. Again, that did not appear at launch. We didn't have exocrafts right from the word go. We didn't get those till quite a long time in. And this is very much in keeping with the Abyss. It's like even the anglerfish there. Well, we have the anglerfishes pop out now when you pinch Hadal cores. So I think they took a lot of inspiration from this just one image to make the Abyss. Pretty darn freaking sweet that they put a whole update probably around one piece of art. So, look at these images and think, wow, No Man's Sky's got a lot of potential. If they're still feeding from some of this inspirational artwork into current iteration and journey, I think we're in for a pretty good treat, especially since Hello Games has said that their list is long and strange and they can't wait to show us more, even this year. So I'm still kind of excited for whatever this year brings in way of updates for No Man's Sky, even though we know that they're working on another project. Welcome, Dr. Pong. It's good to see you in the house, Dr. Pong. She's got an awesome channel as well. Check her out, people, if you haven't already. And hello there, Ken. Welcome, Ken.
Books like this and movies that came around at the same time, Journey to the Centre of the Earth, adventurers, explorers, going off into the unknown. Movies like The Mysterious Island or Sinbad or The Odyssey, where it's, even though they're pioneers going to islands, there's a definite crossover with sci-fi, whereas rather than going to an island, you're going to a whole new planet. And obviously these movies are quite cheesy. They'd have giant crabs and things like that. But
we've got giant crabs in No Man's Sky, Mr. Duncan. But yeah, they're not all that freaking dangerous. All of these are dangerous creatures. I would love to see gigantic megafauna that actually pose a threat to us, Mr. Grant Duncan. Yes, we've got those cat creatures and maybe a few T-Rexes that look like they're made out of carrier bags that might chase us about from time to time, but it'd be nice to have more variety in which creatures are hostile or aggressive. You know, it would be cool.
It definitely captured that feeling of, especially watching them as a kid, being like, you've arrived at this island, anything is possible. I remember when we first announced No Man's Sky, it was incredible how many developers and artists came up to us afterwards and they were all saying like, that's the game I've always wanted to be making, or I started working on a game a bit like this. And it's that thing that we're not pretending like No Man's Sky is this idea that nobody else has ever had, because everyone has had this idea. It's just, ever since you were children, probably, if you've been thinking about working on artwork, that you'd build a world and then you'd populate it with your creatures, with your characters, and No Man's Sky is the ultimate art project for that. That I can create a planet and I can do whatever I want, and that is absolutely terrifying. So this is a piece of key art we created quite early on. Hopefully you can see a lot of the influences of what I just talked about, like Ralph McQuarrie, Chris Foss, and all the Lost World and the Journey to the Centre of the Earth, mysterious floating islands, the crescent planet on the horizon.
So one of you mentioned multi-cruise ships. That definitely looks like a multi-cruise ship. We haven't got anything that large right now. I mean, look at it, landed next to those Diplos and the size comparisons. I do hope that we do get multi-cruise ships. The fact that it's featured in one of their key pieces of art makes me wonder whether they might one day show themselves into game. But we can only but wait and see.
And we create this kind of artwork almost as something we could, as artists, we can all look at and agree that this is the vibe we're going for. So we wanted that feeling of a world you want to explore, a world that you don't know about, and a world that has history. It's very easy to kind of forget about history on a planet that is a jungle, but
okay, so this is another piece of key art created by them. What's that? There's a freaking waterfall right here. We don't have waterfalls in game right now. People have found that there might be hints that there might be new water physics coming into the iteration inside the game code, but they've been there for a while and it hasn't actually happened as yet, but we can only but hope that something might be on the horizon. I have noticed inside of the pirate stations now, you get waters dripping from the ceiling. If you look where it's actually dripping down to, there's like a little rippling puddle as well, which looks really quite cool. It looks like they are playing with some of the water physics, and maybe we might see something along those lines. I mean, at the end of the day, it could just be a particle emitter that makes the actual waterfall, but it's getting it in place to the right sort of level of overhang. And to get a procedural engine to produce a waterfall could be a bit tricky. I can imagine water going the wrong direction, all sorts of weird shenanigans. But then again, that can make the planet feel slightly more alien, but broken. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see if they can bring that into iteration, but that'd be freaking awesome. Hello there, Shiny Red Frag, and we've got Cool Kevin as well. Nice name, Cool Kevin. It's very cool. Right, here we go.
It's actually really important. It was like when we first started creating environments, you just add trees, rocks, bushes and things, but unless you can see where they came from, your brain kind of rejects it. So you have to have little hints that, you know, younger trees, signs that, like ivy and hanging branches, just all these little hints that it hasn't just popped up.
Now, when we get to see the E3 trailer, look at the trees, because you will see a lot of that, what he's just said. There's moss growing on the barks, and there's actual vines hanging down from the trees on some of them, not all of them. And it looks like every tree is procedurally generated, and each tree looks different. But we'll get to that. Hopefully it played the trailer during this video sequence. It's been a long time since I watched this, but I'm fairly confident that he does. Anyway, so yeah, let's press on. Oh, what's that? Replace the biofuel generators, says Rush. 2112 Gamer. Yeah, I wish there was more sorts of ways to generate electricity for your base. Maybe some wind turbines, maybe even hydro fuel for when you put it on a water planet. I mean, you put a base underwater, you still need to power the dang thing, don't you? It's a pain in the frickin' neck that there isn't a water generator. I think more people would build frickin' bases underwater if there was, you know? Or even on extreme planets and you've got some sort of lightning rod or extreme wind generator. Yeah, that might convince people to build a little bit more often.
Erosion has been involved. Various sequences have occurred. So with that in mind, the very first thing we did was that we started with terrain. No Man's Sky is one of these projects that I'd love to take full credit for, but it is incredibly coder orientated, and I have had to work very closely with programmers, and since we're a room full of artists, you can imagine what that was like. Oh my God. But I spent the first year, because No Man's Sky began as like a little prototype within Hello Games, so there's 4 of us working on it, me and 3 coders, and we stuck ourselves in a little room together and noodled around, and it started with a terrain engine, which Sean, our main code dude, he was, I shouldn't say dude, anyway, he was in his bedroom basically, and in his spare time he started working as terrain engine. And one of the things we really wanted to do was really focus on the real world, because it's so tempting when you're working on a sci-fi game just to go straight in and make crazy alien landscapes and giant tentacle trees and all this kind of thing, which we all love drawing. But what we tried to do was look at the real world and understand things like landscape and why things occur. And this is why I wish I'd paid more attention in geography, because I vaguely remembered all these terms like glaciers and limestone caves and coastal erosion and all these kind of things, which I now know I'm an absolute expert in now. So what we tried to do was, we're not simulating these things because doing that in real time would be pretty crazy. But what we try to do is get a similar result. So we have limestone caves, we have lava caves, we have wind erosion, coastal erosion, glacial erosion, and volcanic islands. At least we have things that appear to be those kind of things. I'm going to show you a little video of our terrain in action. So what you're seeing on the right here.
1 second, people. I'm getting trolled again by these freaking bots. So what I want to try and do is bring up another freaking instance of bloody Chrome, and but it keeps opening the same freaking tab. I want to move it onto this screen so I can do it without interrupting you. There we go. I let that play, and I'm going to try and stop them bots.
You have our lodding system. So if you watch, this terrain is being generated as you're traveling along the ground, so it's not stored anywhere. And on the right you can see 3 levels of LOD. The top one is a far distance and the bottom one is a near distance. So you'll see things like the little rocks, the little shrubs, they're all in the low LOD. We're in a debug cam here flying along. Obviously you wouldn't ever see this in game. But what we can do is we can fly incredibly fast. And when we do that, you'll see, because this is faster than you'll ever fly in game, but you'll actually see the terrain can't keep up. And that's because it's trying to calculate too much at once. So if you slow down, you'll see that that's like the visible pop, and that's just the LOD trying to catch up. And this is all created using noise. So it's different algorithms that Sean and the code team have created to give this illusion of like a real place. What you're seeing here is like setting it to something really basic, which is just a sine curve, as just an example of actually what's going on behind the scenes. And this is fairly standard stuff in the world of procedural generation, like Minecraft is a similar thing, but what we have is, because we can have overhangs and caves and complex cave systems and It means we can have a lot more believable terrain. Things like this. This shows like volcanic, not volcanic, sorry, glacial, so you can sort of see the sort of trademark spiky mountains.
So a lot of the stuff on LODs and things like that was discussed in the previous video in episode 1, and they went into the whole math of No Man's Sky and also the coding part of No Man's Sky. Obviously this is the art of No Man's Sky. Now it was supposed to come together, the code and the actual visual elements, to make the game that launched back in 2016. So this was 2015 before it launched, so a lot of the footage that you're seeing here, although it came from the game engine, a lot of it didn't make it into iteration. And I'm wondering why some of this stuff didn't make it into iteration, because it's really freaking cool, isn't it? I'm loving this. You know, the whole planet looks barren apart from this one little tree sitting down there, you know? That kind of makes you think, well, what's over the next hill? Oh, there's a tree. I haven't seen one of them on the whole planet. But yeah, I can't stop those bots. I just changed... It's already on subscriber mode. So this person must be somehow subscribed to my channel before they could put that freaking comment in there. But thank you very much, mods, for hammering that freaking troll. But yeah, I wish YouTube would do more about them, to be honest, because it's not just me that they're plaguing.
But we can also do, by breaking these rules that we've learned, we can create more interesting terrain. So we can have floating islands or mysterious crystals.
Mysterious crystals, yes please. What I like about these is some of these are quite the sharded type that we see now, but all these ones around here almost look like lipsticky type ones. And there's like little clusters too. So if they did ever make a crystal biome, I would love to see more crystal formations, but I would like to see more crystal formations making it on different planets. It's also like the hazardous flora. You've got 3 types of hazardous flora, but those blighters seem to have managed to make it on every biome, every planet, everywhere. It'd be nice to have more hazardous flora, more varieties of, some of them that might be biome specific. Now we get into biomes in a bit. He talks about biomes and he says that No Man's Sky should never have biomes. We'll get to that moment. It's just further on in this video, but when we get there, it's interesting what he has to say about biomes and No Man's Sky. Hello there, JP Black. Welcome, welcome. Just got here. Not a problem, mate. And we've also got James Smith in the house. Well, hello there. Okay, well, let's hit play.
It's quite fun to play about with. And the way we do things like textures, we'll build a huge library of these. This is, in ZBrush, we'll have tiling materials, and we can spit out height maps from that. And I was really proud of this system. And I was talking to Andrew from Naughty Dog the other day, and he's like, oh yeah, we did that in Uncharted 1. And I was like, okay, so maybe it wasn't that clever. But what it means is we can have cliff faces, and we can have sand on the ground, and when the angle's correct, you'll get sand pooling in the cracks and the mountains, and it adds this real believability to the world. And we have hundreds and hundreds of these materials, and we can blend between them, and we can tag them to say how dense they are and how likely they are to erode, which means we can create things like plateaus and overhangs, and that's all based on how dense the material is. And depending on how dense it is, it'll kind of it'll have different specular values and have different, it's a good way to explain. Essentially, it'll have finer detail if it's more dense. That'll do. So we had this system for creating all these different looking terrains with all these different materials, but that wasn't really enough because that didn't get across that Lost World, Journey to the Center of the Earth vibe, which they always had those kind of, you'd go to an island and it would always have something interesting foliage, interesting jungles. And especially once the guys started to talk to me about procedural generation, and I was the only artist working on the game at the time, and we were obviously, it was early days, so they were experimenting, and they started to use 64-bit seed values, which meant that they could do 18 quintillion unique planets, which was very scary to me at the time. So there's 4 artists now, so it's not as scary. But obviously, as an artist, I had to figure out a way of how you divide up 18 quintillion planets between 4 of us, and that was quite a big task. So it turns out you have to be very methodical, you have to divide things up, you have to become a little bit of a robot. And the reason for that is, without constraints, you just end up with a real mess. So we kind of added our own constraints by dividing these things into different categories so that we could actually tackle small problems at once, because if we tried to think about everything all at once, we probably would give up. So one of the things at the very beginning we thought about doing was that we were going to divide up the kind of foliage system into biomes, which is the way games like Minecraft and loads of different games do it. It's the equivalent of like playing Sonic, where you have like a fire level, you have an ice level, you have...
Okay, so this is the bit on biomes, which I found really interesting the first time I had heard this. Now, I heard this before the game launched, and I thought, oh my god, this game is going to be freaking out there. Because everywhere else, like you just said, are doing biomes. But wait till what he says in a moment. It's pretty darn freaking interesting stuff. Cool Kevin says, I wish that they would use like what was it? Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, Unreal Engine 5 is pretty darn freaking epic. But yeah, she would be sort of like limited, wouldn't you? With like Nintendo Switch players and stuff coming on board. But you know, they've developed their own in-game engine, well, in-house engine for all of this sort of stuff. I just hope that they can bolt in sort of like proper ray tracing and stuff when they start bringing out their next game for maybe next-gen consoles.
Of a jungle level, but so you'd fly down to a planet, and this one would be like a sort of alpine, sort of coniferous forest kind of planet. And so we were gathering lots of reference from the real world. Again, the logic being that if we could mimic the real world and get the rules to be in that sort of a believable universe, then at the very end, or towards the end, we could do really fun things, break those rules, and get all the alien variation from that. So we had like woodland, which would be deciduous trees and that kind of thing, which is more like Britain, which is what I'm used to, although it's normally a lot grayer than that. And there's your jungle level, weird little bird guy. And this would be like a Sahara desert type planet, or more like your American Nevada deserts with your cacti and your harsh, spiky terrain. Swamp planets, Dagobah, they're always good. But what we found...
Well, swamp planets, we have got swamp planets now, but they didn't make it into iteration until just the other year. So the fact that he was talking about swamp planets, like Dagobah would be good, or are always good, they weren't in game at launch. However, there is some footage about, even in episode 1. In episode 1, they showed us swamp biome. I think he shows the same footage a bit later on. That swamp biome, for whatever reason, vanished from iteration. And I'm wondering whether, they had the floods shortly after this GDC 15. I'm wondering whether we ended up with some sort of beta simulation that they were working on. But anyway, this is what he goes on to say about biomes and No Man's Sky. This is where it gets really interesting. Buckle yourselves in.
By creating those sort of biomes, those separate biomes, that human beings are really, really good at spotting patterns. So you'd fly down to a planet and it would be a swamp planet, and you'd go, oh, it's a swamp planet. And instantly that breaks this illusion, and you just realize what's going on behind the scenes. And the thing with video game artwork is so much of what we do is an illusion. Like, especially linear games where you can look out a window and you can see a mountain in the distance, but we all know that, you can't get to that mountain. And as artists work in the industry, everything we do is, where it's all pretend, and we don't want anybody to see behind the scenes. And having those separate biomes, it absolutely revealed that. And our game is it's incredibly important that you don't get that sense of illusion. So what we ended up doing was creating what I call a super biome, which is a biome which covers all those biomes in one fell swoop. And
so before he goes into what a super biome is in greater detail, because it's freaking awesome, how many of you already just fly down to a planet and go, oh yeah, it's a radioactive planet, and then take off again after you've seen nothing of all of that interest? Or you land on a frost crystal planet and it looks almost exactly identical to the previous frost biome that you was on. I know that I'm guilty of it more times than I'd like to say. It's like Sazabal just mentioned about the swamp planets, have all those giant root sort of tree stumps everywhere. The ones that you get in aquariums. You go to your local PetSmart or something and you want to buy something for your fish tank. It looks just like one of those freaking things that you put in your fish tank, and they're just dotted all over the place, and sometimes they don't make sense because they're hanging halfway off a cliff. You've got half the roots on the cliff and the rest of it dangling off the other side, defying gravity. Yeah, swamp biomes need a frickin' lot of work. But now hear what he says about super biomes. Super biomes, get this. I don't understand why these aren't in game right now, people.
What's a good way of explaining it? If you imagine if you've ever used like a terrain generation tool where you'll have lots of different sliders that control different things like spikiness of mountains, trees. And we have that, but we have hundreds of different sliders, and we have min and max values for all those different sliders, but I don't have to go into every planet and manually move those sliders. What happens is when a planet is terraformed, those sliders are moved to different positions. Now, originally those positions were random, but what we found really interesting is if you start to link those sliders to things within the universe, like distance from a sun, whether the planet has a moon or not, then the results start to become believable, and you start to spot patterns, but it's patterns that you accept because you start to realize that, oh, this planet's really close to the sun, so the foliage is either going to be non-existent or it's just not going to be very green.
Okay. All right. Okay. So there's a few things to digest there. Distance from the sun. Well, the suns right now, we can move them in camera mode. We all know that they're just a pixel that generates light. They're just a light source. And we've got 3 of them, and they all tend to be in the same place in some systems, or 2 in some systems, or 1 in others. But they are not actual places. So trying to generate the distance between the sun and the planet just doesn't happen in current iteration. In fact, people are trying to fly to the sun. Professor Cynical done a fairly recent video, but people have tried it multiple times. But watch his, see what happens. His ship freaking dissolves and all sorts of other weird stuff starts to happen after you get so far towards the sun. So sun distance is not a thing, but it clearly was when he was talking about it, because they based all the sliders. He's talking about how the worlds are actually generated in 2015 before launch, and it was done from sliders and it was done from distance to sun. So it does make you wonder. They also talked about planetary rotation in one of these videos. I can't remember which one it was now, but apparently it got too confusing for the player. But if there was distance to the sun and also the planets rotating, then I would imagine different planets would have different rotational speeds and maybe different night and day cycles, which would have been pretty epic as well, because now it just seems to be that all planets shift from day to night at the same time in a system, which again doesn't really add to the believability. So I don't know why they've taken out a lot of this simulated believability and realism inside of some of their solar systems. I don't get it. I don't get why they moved away from this super biome idea, which sounds freaking phenomenally awesome, and moved us to biomes, because he said it himself. People will spot patterns. Patterns that we don't really want to accept. However, he has a solution for patterns that you do accept, because they've got an element of believability with relationship to their moons and their suns. Really, really would love to understand the logic behind why they moved to fixed biomes away from the super biome idea. I don't get it.
And that's where the believability comes into it. And another thing from looking at the real world is I realized that our planet is a very strange place. Like these in the Philippines are called the Chocolate Hills. There's a really cool folklore about this, which is apparently 2 giants had a really big fight and they were throwing boulders at each other, but then they made up and they walked away, but they forgot to take their boulders with them, and that's where the Chocolate Hills came from.
Well, that's pretty amazing. I can't imagine what would have terraformed those inside of Earth's sort of habitable environment. I mean, what the fudge would carve out all these sort of things? I mean, yes, you said about giants throwing boulders. We've got the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which is a similar sort of story. It does make you wonder whether giants might have been a real thing. If you got the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, one side of the globe, the Philippines, the other side of the globe, same stories. Pretty darn freaking gnarly, huh? But then again, you know, if you want to start looking into giants and are giants real, there's lots of good videos on freaking YouTube. In fact, I should do a Captain Steve Talks about giants. That'd be cool. Hello, Levi Reavers. Yeah, with the actual adverts and stuff that you see at the beginning and end of my videos, although I say, yeah, that throws revenue down my avenue. Yeah, you only need to watch, I think, about 40 seconds of the longer videos. And as soon as the skip button appears, you can watch it for a little bit longer than that and then hit skip. You know, I think it's about 14 seconds on the skippable ones. And the non-skippable, either way, you have to watch all those. You haven't got a choice. All right, anyway, let's get back to this.
Angkor Wat, if you've ever been to Cambodia and seen these, it is like something H.R. Geiger would make, with these weird tentacle-like roots.
Okay, Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat. There's some carvings at Angkor Wat, people, and they're of stegosaurs. How the fudge would the people of Angkor Wat knew what a stegosaur would look like? You know, Frickin' mentals. Anyway, there's videos on that as well. Someone please block those frickin' trolls again. They gone mental. I know it counts as interaction, but they're frickin' git bags. Go away, git bags.
Destroying the old ruins.
Sorry about that, people in the viewerverse.
Like Guilin in China, which are, again, a lot of these are natural formations, and it does make sense from a geography point of view, but when you see them, it is like an alien landscape. And I love these acid pools. I've used 2 images because it absolutely blows my mind that that's a real place.
See, now that would be cool as well. I know that we've got, like, you know, the gamma reactive planets and stuff, but it'd be nice if there was actually bubbles that came up in some of these pools. And also the sort of erosion that you get here. It'd be quite cool to see that sort of level of coloration on some of the gamma planets. We've got a bit of that, don't get me wrong. But I know there was a guy at Yellowstone Park that fell into one of those vats of water. I mean, it looks like water, but it was acidic. It dissolved him within 24 hours. Freaking crazy stuff. Our planet's pretty gnarly.
And the conclusion from these images is something we kind of realized quite early on, that we don't actually need to go full alien. We could actually just mimic the real world, and we get absolutely incredible spectacle just from doing that.
Well, cool, Kevin. I just blocked and banned that Naked HD whatever. I looked for their username and tried to find their channel. I couldn't. So I went into, because they're actually in my live chat, I right-clicked and went hide from channel. They then appeared in my hide from channel listing. They've actually blocked. So I don't know how these bots are doing it, but they're managing to. You know, at this point, it becomes YouTube's problem. I messaged YouTube about all of this a little while ago, and they said, sorry, there's not much we can do. I'm like, what the, really? And you're creating AI? Okay, all right, we trust you with that then. Brilliant, awesome. If you can't stop a simple spam bot, what happens if someone hacks your AI? You know, freaking heck. It scares the life out of me sometimes, it really does. So this is a Giant's Causeway over in Ireland that I was on about. And look at that. How does erosion cause such angular erosion? It's just mind-boggling. Our planet is freaking amazing. And you know what? When you look at that from the Philippines and you look at this from Ireland, and they're opposite sides of the globe, like I was mentioning earlier, and the different levels of erosion, wouldn't it be cool to have planets with multi-biomes inside of No Man's Sky? You know, the north, the south, and the middle. In fact, I've done a video on terraforming. I was hoping that one day, you know, the abandoned systems, they've got no fauna in, the station's pretty abandoned, there's hardly any NPCs, in fact there's no NPCs. It'd be nice if we could claim those systems and do some terraforming of our own, and maybe even terraform planets and put multiple biomes on there, because I'd love, you know, the exotic cat one, I'd like to mix that with maybe a fungal world or something. That'd be pretty darn freaking sick, wouldn't it?
Like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. This has got a good folktale as well. Apparently there was an Irish giant and a Scottish giant, and I think it was the Irish guy slagged off the Scottish guy. So what happened is the Irish guy started to build this causeway because he was going to go and beat him up, and the Scottish guy started to do the same thing, and they've actually got 2 examples of this causeway either side of the channel. I don't know who won, but I imagine it was the Scottish guy. So
Okay, now, you know all the interviews with Sean Murray where he shows the E3 trailer and there's the Diplos and they're walking in the water and all the antelope run away and the rhino smashes the tree and all that lot. And Sean Murray says, we didn't script this. This is just a planet amongst loads of planets. We just flew down and this is what we found. This is not a tech demo. This is actual gameplay. In fact, when you go on YouTube and you type in E3 No Man's Sky trailer, it says gameplay on there. And, you know, when you tie that up to what Sean Murray said in all the interviews, this is just a planet amongst many. This is not scripted. Hear what he says about this one piece of artwork. What
we wanted to do was create a few key concepts that would capture the vibe of this lost world, this No Man's Sky. And like, if anyone's seen the video we released years ago now, the E3 video where you walk down to the watering hole and the antelope run away, this was the piece of key art that kind of influenced that.
This is the piece. This is the piece of concept art that influenced that demo. Obviously scripted then. Obviously. obviously scripted to make it look like this piece of key art. They created this key art, in his own words, years before that piece of tech demo. There it is. Make of that what you will. But yeah, when they came out, all those videos, No Man's Sky Lies or No Man's Lie and all that sort of stuff, and Sean was getting a bit of heat. When you watch this GDC clip and you hear the actual concept piece of art, and then you marry that up to what Sean said to various interviewers and media outlets, you can see why there was a bit of backlash there, considering that we still haven't got biomes or planets that look as alive, breathable alive as that concept tech demo. But it wasn't actually. If it said E3 tech demo, work in progress, and then maybe in the description it said this is just a work in progress, this is not in-game footage, it doesn't say none of that. Go look the video up and it says gameplay footage captured on PlayStation 4, and it's kind of set expectations that still haven't been met, in my opinion. But anyway, that's my opinion, though, and a lot of people say, Captain Steve, No Man's Sky is far better than what we saw at E3. Although that it is, game-wise, yes, because we've got multiplayer, we've got so much more to do, we've got base building, we've got so much more there. But what about exploration? I bought this game for exploration, and the planets aren't as deep, aren't as alive as what was previewed or promised. Because I took it as a promise, because of the way that video is labelled. And it's even on Hello Games' frickin' news press page. If you go to the No Man's Sky website and go to Press Pack, you see the E3 demo. And a lot of the images are from that E3 demo for the press packs to use. So it's still putting out false images and false hopes for what this game might actually entail or have inside of it. I don't know. I still feel slightly, I know it's wrong to say because we've had so many 3 updates, but it does feel that it fell short of what was suggested to be inside of this video here.
These are real quick sketches, but all trying to kind of get across the vibe that we wanted to have each time you fly down to a new planet. And what this did, it gave us targets. It meant we could tweak things like slider values to try to make these kind of events more likely. And you'll see they all, well,
looking for royalty-free music? Discover
these landmarks.
Sorry about that, people.
And we always wanted to have that sense that you fly down, there's always something on the horizon that draws you to it, rather than just being a dull terrain. There's always something you see that you want to go to. And obviously that's fine having all these nice little pictures, but actually getting that with a procedural system has been probably the most challenging thing. Like, I should mention this project has been by far the hardest thing any of us have ever done. And if you're thinking about doing a procedural game, I probably wouldn't. It's really difficult. I was trying to, I did a talk on Monday, and I was surrounded by people much better than I am, like Neil from BioWare, and I was asking him if he might consider, you know, taking the strength of BioWare and maybe creating some procedural tools for the rest of us to use, so we don't have to create them all ourselves, because it's just too much work for us. So procedural white boxing, I'm getting distracted, is the idea being that you have props that get placed in a terrain, just like any time you decorate an environment. But because it's procedural, you don't necessarily know what those objects are going to be, because they...
Okay, well, those bots, people, I've just reported them as sexually explicit. So, yeah, the report's gone out. I've just hit hide from channel. I just blocked them again, which I've already done. So, who knows? Let's just hope that's put an end to them, but I don't think it has. Yeah, not great.
They get created procedurally. So what we do is we know that procedural props will be within a certain scale or will have a certain silhouette, and that's how we kind of control it. So when we procedurally white box like this, it means, like, even though these aren't props, these are just rough versions of it. It means when we're balancing like min-max values, we kind of get a vague idea what it might look like. So if I was loading this environment and replacing all these props with real procedural props, they'd kind of roughly fill those shapes, and it means we can kind of ensure it's more likely to look artistically pleasing.
Okay, so what they've done here is they've put actual fixed wireframes in placement of procedural props, is what he was saying. Now, I think that we've still got created meshes and wireframes instead of procedural props. You see that all these are pretty much straight and they're just a copy of the same tree that's been copied and pasted everywhere. Well, that's what we've got in game right now. When you see the E3 demo, every tree has got a different bend to it, and that's what you mean by procedural props, which is what he's talking about. This is procedural whiteboxing. So this is just putting fixed assets in place of what would be procedurally generated, and I still think that we've got a bit of a hybrid going on. I'm fairly sure that the terrain is being procedurally generated, but I think it's being done with layers of noise, which is in episode 1. Check out that if you want to understand terrain generation. But when it comes to prop generation and the morphing of actual wireframes, I don't think they've actually got any real procedural props. They might have a couple, but they're too and far between that you don't even really notice them because there's too many fixed assets in place of procedural props. I don't know why that is either. So super biomes, don't understand why they didn't move away from that. And procedural props, I don't know why they moved away from that. Is it down to limitations? But then if that's the case, why talk about them at all in 2015 if they weren't going to be used? I mean, that's what set Hello Games and No Man's Sky aside from any other game that uses, we've got so many other games. They mentioned it, like Minecraft. They use biomes. They use fixed props. We've got something very similar going on in No Man's Sky. It's like a slightly, far better graphical version of Minecraft in a roundabout way. Which again, when you look at, which video is it? So another episode that I'm going to do on this, after launch, Sean Murray actually gets on the stand at GDC. GDC 2017, I believe. And he talks about comparisons between Minecraft and No Man's Sky, and it's a freaking awesome watch. So we'll be doing that one in the very near future. I'm thinking after this one though, like the Ian Goodening of No Man's Sky, I might review half of that up to the point of launch. All the things that might have stopped these things from happening. Like the super formula, like the lawsuits that they got from freaking Sky. Yeah, Sky, the television show. They wait till the next episode because, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the first half of Ian Goodening No Man's Sky next, up to the point of launch. So you can see all the hardship that these guys actually had while they're trying to do all this artistry wonder and programming, what they were up against. The shenanigans of freaking big tech. Freaking gitbags.
Pleasing. And talking about procedural props, we use our blueprint system to create these. So it's not I've been talking to a few artists over the past week, and they're all really interested in procedural artwork, but also very skeptical of it, understandably so, because a lot of the way it's presented on the internet and things is just this magic button that you click and then artwork pops out. But and I imagine some people do that, but that's not how we do it. It's still incredibly artistic driven, and your procedural artwork's only as good as the base template that we create. I'm going to talk about that. So this is a tree trunk.
Before he moves on to here, I can't sort of gloss over one of the messages that popped up here from, I think it was your mama. It says, have you spoken with Survival Bob about doing a studio tour, Captain? If you mean Hello Games and doing a studio tour, I don't think they will let us into a studio to do a tour. Mainly because when they were working on No Man's Sky, you can see all the artwork all over the wall and things. If they are working on a new project, they're going to have similar going on there. And it might sort of leak into the community exactly what they're working on. I don't think we're going to get anywhere near to doing a studio tour. But I have been talking to them about the event. At least one person at Hello Games. I've talked to them about, maybe dropping something off there that we sign. Last time we've done a guest book. This year I'm going to take along a banner that we're all going to sign. And they said that there might be somebody in on the bank holiday to take receipt of that banner. So I'm going to be taking that along. I don't think they're going to let me in. I might be cheeky and ask if we can have a little butchers, but I think the answer is going to be no. But yeah, there we go. Anyway, back to if you're on about my room right here. If you want to see my room, a studio tour of my room, if that's what you mean. Okay, here it is. This is my studio. So this is one wall. Yeah. If I reach over there, I can nearly touch the other wall. You can see the freaking door to exit the room there. Well, when that door frame ends, that's where the room ends. It's a freaking box that I'm in. It gets rather toasty and rather warm. Yeah, and over there's a window. And that's it. That's my studio tour done. Anyway, back to this. Right, play button, go.
And this is the blueprint system. It adds a type of branch. It then adds a a type of leaf. It then selects a bark type and a leaf type, and it is then decorated to match the environment, and it is then skewed.
So that's the skewing that I'm on about. So every single mesh in that previous one was a fixed wireframe, where this is a procedural object that can be skewed, as he puts it. And that'll be done in the same way with sliders to differentiate what gets put onto where and how it's moved around. Now, he talks about these sliders not only for objects but for creatures and for planets, which is pretty phenomenal.
To be different. And then we can see it for a different version where we take the same trunk, a different set of branches is selected, different leaves, different texture, and different shape. And essentially, every single prop in the game is created like this. And what you're seeing here is, in the same way I talk about the train having all these different sliders, we have the same for trees. So all that's happened here is it's gone, I'm going to add some branches. How many branches shall I add? Select it based on a slider. What kind of leaf am I going to have? Select that based on a slider. So these are just two examples, and that's just one type of trunk. We have hundreds of kinds of trunks and thousands of different leaves and hundreds of different bark types. And the way it feels is that we're actually, if you've ever played like World of Warcraft, where you load up the game and you spend the first 10 hours fiddling around with the character creation, just scaling bones, moving decals. We have that, but for every single prop in the game. So it's all based on this set of parameters that we custom make for each thing. And what's cool with that as well is that we can have, well, I'd say here about it, the age of a prop, but that's, I hate the word prop. It can be the age of anything. So we can have trees, and you can say, you know, if you want a tree to be within a certain age, you know that the trunk will be thinner, it'll have less branches, and the same with a creature, you know that the head stays roughly the same size, the body will be smaller, the legs will be shorter, and it means you can very easily have like a whole flock of sheep, and you can have adolescents, you can have babies, you can have grown adults, and I don't have to custom make those. All I have to do is say, when you spawn a group of sheep, you should spawn, 10 adults, 15 adolescents, and it knows, because you tell it the min and max values of those, that it'll just create them, and that adds to the believability of the world.
Now, you do see that with animals. Granted, you do, which is pretty darn sweet, which is cool. But yeah, what we don't see is all those sort of morphs and things happening to the trees and the foliage. So, like in the intros to these games, well, to No Man's Sky, it says every rock, tree, fish, plant, but it even says leaf, branch, whatever, all procedurally generated. Well, that's what he's talking about. What we've got is very fixed and very uniform, and everything just looks copy and pasted, copy and pasted. Not only have we got biomes, but we're then wanting to land on those planets, the things to see of interest. You can see with your eyes, just by circling around from outside of your ship, you know what's going to be over the hill is exactly the same as what you've got where you're standing at that point in time. The only thing that might be different is the oceans and the caves. But how many of us go in oceans and caves? Because we've seen oceans on multiple planets that are almost identical to the one that you're probably going to be swimming in on that planet. Or the same with caves. I mean, the caves have got slightly more interesting in recent update. They have overhauled them slightly. But even still, we don't get cave-specific fauna. We don't get, slugs that climb up the walls or snails or anything. What you find in the caves are usually going to be a crab creature or maybe a small sort of mole creature. You're not going to get anything that burrows, which doesn't make any sense. Now, we do have burrowing creatures. It'd be nice if burrowing creatures actually chose to make nests or something in caves, and you come across those, There's so much more they could do with caves. There's so much more they could do with oceans, like make them deeper, add in giant megafauna in there. I mean, yes, we do get larger creatures in there, but they're probably about the size of your ship. They're not gargantuan. There's no real reason to go into the oceans to explore. And there's no sense of danger either. I think when you're swimming into the depths of the ocean, there should be a sort of slight shite what's in here. I know that if I'm out on a dinghy on a giant lake, I'm even thinking, what if there's a giant pike in this lake? God knows what I'd feel like if I was out at sea and where there can be sharks. Heck no. Yeah, that's a brown trousers moment.
This is a blueprint system on the trees. So what you see on the left here is just all the variants, and on the right you essentially see what is currently picked. This is just an in-game tool we have for viewing variants. So I click on view variants, and it creates a load more on the left, and you can see the currently selected one on the right.
Your mama, I think the internet historian made the Ngoodening of No Man's Sky. I think me and you might be talking about the same video, my friend. So yeah, got that to look forward to. Heck yes. And I'm not going to lose my call. But it does annoy me, those freaking porn bots, if that's what you're on about, shiny red flag. Yeah, it's not good because, you know, YouTube is supposed to be an all-inclusive place for people. It's not there for advertising porn channels. It's wrong. And YouTube should be doing more, in my opinion, to stop that from happening.
This works for plants as well. So every plant in the game, you see all the variation on the left. I can cycle through them. And the way that's possible is when I was talking about turning yourself into a little robot, that's kind of what I had to do. So we just have a system for creating as many kinds of trunks as we can. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's just we do as many as we can.
Look at the extras though. Fungus, moss, ivy, vines, fawns, flowers, fruit, etc, etc, etc. I don't think I've seen fruit trees. That'd be nice. I don't even think I've seen ones with fawns on them. Well, I might have.
Just try to change the silhouette as much as possible to get as much variation as possible. So we'll have trunks, branches, leaves, different materials, and various extras that we can add on, like fungus, moss, and each one of those small extras adds to the variation. This is an example of some of the alphas we create for leaves.
So where he talked about erosion and age of things and talking about the moss on them, it's not every tree would have it. It's maybe one or two would have it. You know, like how you got adult creatures with baby creatures? Well, this was the same sort of module, but for trees. So some trees would have vines, some would have moss, some would have spikes on it, some might even have broken branches, that sort of stuff. And it just didn't make it into the final cut. It didn't make it into the final iteration. I don't know why, because that gives it that sense of believability. And I know that I'd be more inclined to explore and take photos if I knew that there was a chance of finding a tree with a nice bend by a lake or a pond or something and get that perfect photo where every tree's freaking upright and every tree looks the same. It breaks that believability. And he said it himself countless times in his video that No Man's Sky is one of those games that goes beyond that. It lifts the veil. But it doesn't. It doesn't, and I don't know why they moved away from this vision. And I'm hoping that they're going to be moving back towards their vision. When I do the Ngoodening of No Man's Sky review, you'd see all the reasons as to why I think that a lot of this got dropped inside of that video. So although it might sound that I'm being a little bit harsh on these guys now, comparing to what we've got, and what was said to be coming into the iteration out of these chaps' mouths, not just this second video, but the first, I think it's going to put into context where we are now and the hopes and visions for the future. So I'm hoping that if you watch this as a playlist, it comes across as extremely positive, because I've got nothing but love for Hello Games and for No Man's Sky, and I'm hoping that comes across by the end of the playlist. I really am.
And these are really cool because you just create as many as you want, and it's amazing the impact it has. What you're seeing here is an example of the blueprint system. Like, this is what I'm showing here is exactly the same planet, but all I've tweaked is the seed value of the trees. So you're stood in exactly the same place, and I've just clicked view variants, and it's just changed the type of tree.
But hold on, let me just go back to that one image where it was a bit bigger. No, it didn't change. Change, dang you! Okay, sorry people. One sec. I pressed the pause button at the right point here.
Really cool,
he moves on from some slides really quick, doesn't he? Look at the fruit on these. Look, these giant freaking gnarly weird fruits on some of the trees, not all of the trees. And some of these are like just round, where this one's more oblong, so it looks like they maybe go through different sorts of stages of gestation. I'm only guessing, but that's what it looks like to me. And then when you look at the trunks on some of these, some of them have got like the moss that climbs all the way up to like here. You can see here this one's climbing up even higher, where this one is really low down, and then some don't even have it on at all. So that's quite cool. But then when you look at this one, it's like this tree almost looks like this one, but then no, they're completely different. These two look fairly similar, because look, this one goes off in a V, so does that one. But this one's got more of a bend here than that one has there. And this one's V is more pronounced than that one. So you're not seeing any trees that are exactly the same. They're all different. And look at the grass as well. It just looks, those 4 screenshots look so more believable. I would much rather explore these 4 planets than any of the planets that we've got in current iteration.
Yeah, what you're seeing here is an example of the blueprint system. Like this is, what I'm showing here is exactly the same planet, but all I've tweaked is the seed value of the trees. So you're stood in exactly the same place, and I've just clicked view variants, and it's just changed the type of tree. And here you can see it again. And what this is showing is that even if we weren't to change the terrain at all, if we weren't to touch mineral colors or anything like that, you can still get a very different feeling planet just from changing tree shapes, which to us was really amazing because one of the number one...
Just by changing tree shapes. And he's right. I mean, look at that. That one goes right off at a freaking angle over there. I mean, these are quite small on my screen, so on your screen they must be titchy. But yeah, when you actually look at this video, the actual video link is inside of my video description. So if you want to watch this again without me talking and interrupting and pausing it all the time, go watch it again. Watch it on your freaking 4K TVs at home, even though it doesn't go up to 4K. What does it go up to? It goes up to 720p. But even still, you can see it in a lot more sharper, decent overhaul. And you're going to be blown away. But it's a shame, because what we got, although it is fantastic, don't get me wrong, it's still not this.
The number one thing people seem to worry about is how you make every planet feel different. And the moment we started to fiddle around with those kind of values, it made us all feel a lot calmer.
Look at these trees. Exactly. Oh, he's going to play it. Cool. So when he plays this video, just pay close attention to the trees and all the bends. Also look at how the Diplo's heads turn. They sort of rotate. None of ours do that in the freaking current iteration. They don't wade into the freaking water like this. But now this makes a lot more sense because we know that they crafted this based on his freaking artwork. Yeah, it's not a scripted planet. But yeah, there we are. Let's just hit play. I'm going to turn up my win amp so I don't get a strike. I know there's 2 bits of music playing at the same time. Sorry. That sounds alright. Look at that structure. Oh, look at them trees. Look how they casually meander as well. And we've got ourselves like a luminous biome there. We still haven't got that biome, or that biome. Frickin' mentals. Oops, I hit pause. I can just turn that down actually, can't I? There we go. How cool is that? Ah! Okay, I'm not that quick. Let's turn that back down. I thought I paused him. Oh, you git bag. Right.
Yeah, so this is a message I got from one of our coders at Christmas time. It's always nice.
That was quite a cool Christmas card. Sorry.
Yeah, this is the Milky Way, which is our galaxy. It's a spiral arm.
DJ Captain Steve.
We're somewhere in there. That's quite a scary thought. So what I'm going to talk about is our galactic map, or our in-game galaxy. And it's a really strange thing to talk about because this game, more than any other game I've ever worked on, it's been quite an educational sort of process because, like I was saying about geography and things like that, I never, as an artist, I didn't really pay a lot of attention at school. I was very interested in what I was interested in. So having to do galactic artwork has meant I've had to Google things like spiral arms, and it's really, really scary. And I don't know if any of you have read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I've watched the movie, couldn't do the book.
Something which is called the total perspective vortex. And the story goes something like this. So there was a scientist, and he had a loving wife, but his wife used to nag him a great deal, and she would always just pull him up on these really small, insignificant, at least in his eyes, little things. So he thought, like, if there was only some way I could show her how unimportant these things she's moaning about are. And being a scientist, he thought, I know, what I'll do, I'll invent a machine that she can put on, and what that machine can do is, in a split second, it will show you the entire universe. And it will, at that same split second, show you in comparison to the entire universe. And I imagine it's something a little bit like an Oculus Rift. You put it on.
That'd blow your mind.
And he turned it on, and it destroyed her brain.
Yeah, not
so
surprised.
That was our main kind of inspiration for our galactic map.
Right, cheers. Yeah, pretty funny guy. Yeah. Okay, so something here. We've got Antheti Cassius. It says there's nothing that would join you, make them want to go to the nothing that would draw them to the oceans. Things that would draw me to the oceans in No Man's Sky is if they were a lot deeper. They contained megafauna, and that megafauna could kill you. And if you could actually kill it and maybe get some sort of rare sort of commodity, either that you can sell for frickin' loads of units, or nanites, or even show a trophy to maybe the Viking, because they love frickin' giant fauna and stuff. You know, maybe you could take the carcass to them or something, trade it in for some quicksilver. Another way to get quicksilver by going into the oceans and taking on megafauna. And maybe it's an end game sort of thing to do. Look for oceanic planets that are super deep. That'd be freaking excellent. Pillars of Creation, look at that image. That's a real image, isn't it? That was captured by Hubble, wasn't it?
As well as cool things like the Pillars of Creation, which I think is an awesome title. This is the Eagle Nebula, which is also really cool. Space is filled with really cool things. This is a little video. So I should mention,
Not again.
One of the things I've tried to stay away from.
I'm just going to turn the volume down on here for his video.
And that was one of those bold things I said at the very beginning of the project. Chris Foss, he uses colours, you know, none of this black. But when you're trying to do a star field and you're staying away from black, it becomes this real weird challenge because it stops feeling like you're flying through space. It's really easy for it to feel like you're flying underwater. So finding images like this of the Pillars of Creation was really useful to me because it's still obviously space, but it's colourful. So this was a massive, a really useful image when I found it. Oh, wrong button. So what you're going to see here is every single one of these little dots is a solar system you can fly down to, and that's, until you play the game, it's not obvious. You just have to keep that in mind.
Right, so I turned the volume down a little here. I mean, we've all seen the galactic map now. But I do like the way that it put all the actual text up there. Now we get quite a small little tiny window. And, you know, it might tell you whether it's a conflicted area or whatever and so forth and so on. But that was quite nice as well. But yeah, when you look at how big this actual game is with this galactic map, it is freaking phenomenal what they've managed to pull off. Especially since, you know, we saw Starfield the other day. And what's that, 6 years on from No Man's Sky? And it's still not as impressive when it comes to size. I mean, yes, they've got 1,000 odd planets, and they do say that each of these planets is going to be fairly explorable, but I'm wondering to what extent, and will there be any sort of patch on what we get in No Man's Sky? But, you know, anyway, let's get the volume back up.
Spaceships.
Spaceships, cool, look at that!
So you can't really make a science fiction game without thinking about spaceships at some stage, so I thought I'd talk about it straight after that. I asked Aaron, who is one of the artists I work with. He is an incredible artist.
Wow.
He's one of those guys that lives and breathes hard surface modeling, and so I asked him if he could. He's the main guy. He is responsible for all our spaceships basically in the game. I can't take credit for those. I did like the one in the prototype video, but he has taken those and he has done amazing things. So I asked him to put together an image that showed what he was thinking when he's been designing spaceships, and he thought he would use Comic Sans in his image. So I was going to take it out, but screw him, it's his problem. So what we're seeing here is we have 3 types of ships that you can get hold of in the game. So we have trading ships, fighter ships, and explorer ships, and essentially you can pick any of those ships, whatever you want, but certain ships are more useful. Like if you want to be a trader, then you're going to get a ship that has a bigger cargo hold and is more armored, and fighters generally are smaller and nippier, and explorers are weird and scientific. So this image just kind of shows some of the inspiration that Aaron took from various places. Let's get away from that Comic Sans.
Assistant No Man's Sky says it was taken by Hubble, but coloured by artists. I didn't know that. Are you sure? Or are you having me on? I thought they used an infrared camera, so it showed up all the different colours of the nebula. Oh, don't tell me it was done by frickin' artists. That's just destroyed my vision of frickin' space now. It's just a black void of evil. That's what it is. Anyway, let's hit play. It would have been nice though if our galactic map had spiral arms and also had things like eagle nebulas where the constellations of stars actually painted out images. Because right now that feels very randomly placed. We don't really get constellations of stars in the night sky, do we? Or spiral arm galaxies. I know there's mods out there though. There's mods for PC that do give these spiral arms into the game, which is quite cool.
One of the things he was saying is it's absolutely impossible not to tread on some toes when you're designing spaceships. Like, we get so much stick online of just being like, oh, they've just copied an X-Wing or they've just copied a Viper, and it's like, you should try to create a spaceship and not tread on some toes. It's absolutely impossible, but the way we've tried to do it is to kind of look at a lot of the World War II planes, because they have that sort of chunky style, which is something at Hello Games we've always been real fans of. These are some of the early concepts of the fighters. And it's an interesting thing with procedural systems, because we could, if we wanted, make spaceships completely procedural and unpredictable. But
I'm loving some of these. Look at that one. That one's really quite gnarly. I like that. I mean, it's got the fan engine. That made it in. This nose made it in, but this whole back piece here and these wings didn't, which is a shame. Again, with these wings as well, they're pretty cool too. I mean, this whole ship made it in. That one there, is that the only one on that screen that actually made it into the final cut? I mean, if that ring actually was completed, that one too, maybe. Yeah, that's the only real one on this whole freaking artistic panel that made it in. I do hope, fingers crossed, that a few more of these make it into iteration, because some of those are freaking lovely. I mean, they've all got the same freaking vector nose, haven't they? Or the alpha nose, whatever you want to call that one. Is it the alpha nose? And it's the vector wings, isn't it? That's the alpha nose, vector wings. Yeah, so that's the only one that made it in out of all of those. But look at that. That looks freaking deadly, that one. Love them.
But when we were doing that, we found it made, like, as an artist, sometimes people talk about things like gameplay, and gameplay is something that's been created to make art worse. So we have to listen to these guys, and then we make our art worse, and it makes the game better, and people are happy. So we have fighters, and we have dropships, and we have explorer ships, and the problem we had is when they're entirely procedural, you couldn't really tell the difference between them. So although they are still procedural, we just have a set of rules. So with fighters, even though they're all different ships, you can kind of tell there's like a similar vein. They'll have like 2 wings, and they'll have an engine, and they'll have a cockpit, and they'll have a nose, and all that is like a set of constraints that means the end result is recognizable and readable for the player. You can see some more examples here.
Oh, look at those! Have any of these made it in? Have any of these made it into iteration? I think this one has. Those wings are there. That one made it. That didn't. Oh no, that one did. Yeah, with the diamond wings. Why the fudge did you choose that over this? Really? Look at that one. That one's cool. That one looks more deadly. I like these wings more than them wings. I don't know about these diamond wings. I'm not a fan. Oh, look at that one. That one looks freaking evil. I'm liking that. That's pretty darn cool. Or these TIE wings made it in. These droid wings did. But this back area didn't, did it? Really quite cool. Really epic. Oh, what's that? Pan Mike says galaxies only look spiral because of light distortion. You guys are shattering my freaking mind in this chat. I'm learning stuff that I don't want to learn, but I'm liking it anyway regardless. Man, you know, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. I'm glad I didn't now. I also wanted to be an archaeologist. Yeah, but you can do all that in No Man's Sky. I can dig up bones in No Man's Sky. It's a shame you can't assemble the skeletons, though, in No Man's Sky, isn't it? I'd love to see some of the ancient bones and what they assemble to in No Man's Sky. That'd be cool. It'd be nice if there was a bone vendor, like take it to a Viking system, and maybe they would erect some sort of skeleton and give you cash for it and say, can you find me more bits? And you have to go get more of the bones and construct some sort of giant megafauna. And wouldn't it be cool if they could synchronise the DNA and say, right, we think we can stick this on one of the planets now that you've got us all the bones. Boom! Up pops the megafauna for everybody to go and battle. That'd be freaking epic. Do I dream too much? I think I do. Anyway.
And this is like the in-game blueprint view. It's the same system as all the trees and things.
No, he said, we're not making a game of war. Look how many guns this has freaking got. It's got the lovely side rails that we see. We haven't got these wingtips with these guns, though. That's freaking epic. And look, you know, it looks like they put all these pieces in game at one point because they're inside of the generator. So they had the wireframes for a lot of these wings that we saw on the previous page. I mean, look at that one. That one's not in iteration. I'm looking at loads of it. That's not in iteration. There's loads here that we're seeing that aren't in iteration. For whatever reason, they've made the parts. So it makes me wonder if one day we might get some sort of ship overhaul with a lot more parts in, and maybe even ship customization based on some of the artwork we're seeing here, because this looks like the actual engine. You can see all the tabs up here, can't you? And how they're actually put together with inside of this procedural engine. I mean, you've got delete, move, scale, rotate, all this sort of stuff. This is their own in-house engine that they've put all these parts in. So these parts exist somewhere. Yeah, I'd like to hope they do anyway on one of their servers. Or do they? When we get to the next episode of the end goodness of No Man's Sky, and they talk about the flood, I seriously think maybe they lost more than what they're willing to share. Anyhow, let's continue.
You can see all the variation on the left, the main one on the right. I click on View Variants. We can also have procedural decals. These are the dropships.
Wow.
And you'll see they have a different set of rules, so they don't have the same engines, they don't have noses.
Okay, so pretty much all of these made it, well, that one didn't. That one hasn't made it. And I love those side fans engines that way. That's pretty darn cool. We've got the side fans, but they're usually built into wings like this. We've got this one. That one's in. We haven't got this with the side thrusters. So the ones that we haven't got, that one. We haven't got this one. Not exactly, anyway. I mean, I ain't got those wings. We haven't got that one. But all the rest on that screen, I think we've gone and got all of those. So yeah, it looks like Haulers made it in pretty much intact from the actual concept art. Now, I believe a lot of this concept art, forgive me if I'm wrong, is on Bo Lamb's ArtStation page. There's pages and pages of all these concept designs. And it's amazing how the actual 3D artists have managed to replicate what somebody has hand-drawn, essentially. Very cool.
But it means you get, like, very readable shapes. Like, even on the left, even though they're all very different ships, you know they're drop ships, you know they're traders. And what it means is when you're flying through the galaxy and you see a ship flying along, you can very quickly understand what kind of ship it is, and that was hugely important from a gameplay point of view. The same with freighters. We don't need to have as much variation within them, but they're all procedural as well. And because we have factions within the game, they can all be linked together really easily. We can have certain shapes that are more likely to be used in certain factions. We can have certain decals, symbols.
No, you know when we was watching that footage early on with the E3 planet, with the ship that was actually parked on the planet, you can see the engines turning. But not only that, all the light hues from the engines. Now, we only got bloom effects, I think, back in Prism. But it almost looks like they had bloom effects right back in these sort of E3 techie demo-y type gameplay videos. And, you know, that only made it into iteration. So where Sean Murray said that they were building No Man's Sky like on a rocket ship. Oh, we haven't got to that video yet. That's in 2017. Yeah, that would have come after the Ingooden in part 1. Then we'll be doing Sean at GDC 2017. And then I'll do the final part of the Ingooden of No Man's Sky. I might throw in 1 or 2 more videos in between that. But yeah, pretty darn cool. I'm loving doing these. It's really good having little flashbacks to yesteryear. And all of these sort of asteroids in space, now they're quite fixed, but before they used to actually all individually rotate and stuff. Pretty darn freaking gnarly. They didn't used to collide into each other or shatter or anything, but that would have been excellent as well.
Same with space stations. Space stations can be procedural and they can be linked to the factions, which is really cool fun to play around with.
Yeah.
Also, we have creatures in the game.
Before he moves on from there, the whole stations being linked to factions, I wish there was a bit more of that. You go inside the stations and they all feel very much the same and generic. The only thing that's different, I don't know if you noticed, are the doors. The doors open different for the different factions. It's like, I think the Gek one's spiral open, where the Viking ones sort of just open that way, and the Korvax ones sort of do it on a slant or something like that. They've all got different doors, and that's probably the only thing that I really notice when it comes to stations. Buildings on planets are slightly different. There's a slight variation there, but it's not quite like the variation that we get for settlements. The settlements on planets are very different from race to race, you know? So I really wish that they would overhaul the stations and make them a little bit more race specific. It's like if you go in a Viking station, I wish that there was like trophies hanging up of fauna and stuff, and battle trophies, and more to do with multi-tools all over the place, and maybe even pieces of armor that look really freaking gnarly. And it'd be nice if when you visit a Viking station that you can pick up better modules for your multi-tool when it comes to violence or whatever, or combat I should say, because not really that much violence in No Man's Sky really, is there? Well, I say that, there was those griefers in the Nexus the other week. But yeah, and so it'd be nice if Viking stations brought that in. But then if you go into maybe the Korvax, maybe there was more to do with scanning in there. So it's all about discoveries and turning in discoveries on planets and what you've managed to find. So yeah, if you're an explorer, you'll be spending most of your time inside of the Korvax stations. If you're more into hunting down like bounties or looking for creatures to actually kill rather than scan, you'll be going to Viking systems. But if you're just after a quick sale or you want to do bartering, maybe you would go to a Gek system. And Gek systems, maybe the actual stations are a bit more lavish. They've got sort of, I don't know, golden statues and things, and maybe you could buy things for your base there that you can't get somewhere else, like extravagant trophies and things. So it's about cosmetics for your character, cosmetics for your base, that sort of shenanigans. So you go to Gek systems, and Gek systems about buying stuff maybe from pirate systems and selling it for more in the Gek systems. It's about trade. So if you're a trader, Gek systems are for you. If you're an explorer, Korvax. If you're into combat, Viking. So it gives you those sort of splits, you know. So even the player base has got its own sort of factions. I think that would work a lot better for the verse, and I really hope that they do overhaul the stations. I know we've got the station overrides, and my original speculation around that was all based on all this sort of stuff, and maybe taking ownership of those stations inside of those systems and becoming more that way inclined and having missions to that sort of help. So if you are in a Korvax system, you're going to go on more exploring missions and things. But I think that's overbaked and overhyped. I really don't know whether they're going to be doing that much changes this far into game. I mean, we're 6 years in, it's coming out on Apple, it's coming out on Switch. Do they really want to change the game up that drastically? I know they did when it came to Xbox though, didn't they? They added in all the refining, they added in Next, they added in proper multiplayer when Xbox came about, so who knows? I would never say never when it comes to Hello Games. Anyway, let's hear what it's got to say about creatures.
Go drink some water.
I want some!
I don't think we actually have camels, so that's false advertising there.
Oh, that's false advertising, is it? Yeah.
Started to, as I was in full robot.
That's false advertising, but rhinos smashing trees, Diplos that have got frickin' rotating heads, that's all fine, because that's in your tech demo, but it's not in frickin' game. Grant Duncan, frickin' heck. If I was on that stage right now, you would have got a little gentle slap. Frickin', yeah, or a gentle nudge in the shin. Yeah. Get bag.
What mode? So I thought I'll try to categorize creatures to what kind of environments they might inhabit. So snow creatures. But as I was going through this process, the same revelation, which everyone else would probably just immediately know, but was news to me, there's some really crazy creatures on our planet. And like, these creatures could easily be in a sci-fi movie.
That's a tardigrade. If you don't know what a tardigrade is, it's microbiotic. You have to look at it under a microscope. But apparently these things, they survive in sub-zero temperatures, and apparently you can throw them out in space and they survive in a vacuum. Why? If this was the size of a dog, I think they would inherit the frickin' Earth.
And you would just accept it.
Alex angry. I won't mess with that.
If I was going to reveal the protagonists in the game, this is who you actually play as in No Man's Sky. So another thing I discovered, even though I'd been a character artist for many years, I'd made loads of creatures and rigs and whatnot, in looking at skeletons, because essentially when we were breaking things up and dividing things up, we looked at the real world, looked at those photos from earlier and said, we want to have creatures that are a bit like a deer or a bit like a rhino. And
you know, we're doing this meetup. I've told you guys I'm talking to somebody there, but I've invited everybody from Hello Games. I said, if you want to come along, please do. Out of everybody that works at Hello Games, I know that people will most likely want to meet Sean Murray, the brainchild of No Man's Sky. I'd like to meet Grant Duncan. I really like his sense of humour, and I like him as a guy, and also as a creative chap. I would love to meet Grant Duncan and have a chat with him and ask him, what happened to your super biomes idea? What happened to the slider stuff? I would love to have a sit-down conversation with Grant Duncan. If he does see this, you're probably thinking, oh, I'm not going for freaking that meetup now. But yeah, please do. Please come along. I'll buy you a pint, honest. Yeah, and we'd love to sit down and chat to you about this video, essentially, and why the change in direction. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I really would.
In doing that, like immediately, obviously, when we're thinking like that, we're limiting ourselves. But luckily, I'm really glad I did. I have this really big anatomy encyclopedia at work, and I was flicking through it, and I was literally about to start building a rig when I think I just randomly flicked between dog and cat, and I discovered that dogs are basically cats. See? Isn't that interesting? Dogs are also horses. Horses are pigs, just a bit more bent over. Pigs are sheep. Lions are red pandas. And red pandas are triceratops. So that might seem like nonsense, but I'm sure I had a point. So the point is that if you were to have a system where you could move bones around and lengthen bones and tweak bones without having to redo a rig, then you...
What the fudge is that that's just appeared there? And this? Okay, all right, so we've got a lot of these inside of game. We haven't got a camel, like you said earlier, false advertising. But look at these two. I'd love to have some more mythical beasts appear in No Man's Sky. And you know what? They could sneak them in. You know, they could just appear one day. Not even put it in the patch notes. How cool would that be if they just snuck in creatures that you might just start finding in every sort of update? If they just snuck in one or two. Like those beetles and stuff. If they didn't tell people about beetles and they just let the community find them. Oh, that'd be mind-blowing. Sneak a few in. Sneak a few in. You know what? As you grow your team, Hello Games, as you grow your team, get a couple of the people coming in onto sort of Mayor or something. Make them create a couple of creatures just in their first week or so of getting to meet the team. Make something. Just make something and just throw it in. Just throw it in wherever. Every update, just like a handful of new fauna. That'd be freaking epic. Or even flora, for that matter. Especially hazardous flora. That'd be great.
You could make all those creatures on a single rig, which for, you know, BioWare, they wouldn't bother doing that. They just throw 1,000 artists at them and create all the creatures. But we don't have that luxury, so we had to come up with a system for being able to create all these creatures and have them share rigs. And that involved... I can't take credit for this either. We have a very clever guy called Charlie who has created this beautiful IK system, which means we can pull joints around, we can completely push a rig to its absolute limits, and the IK system compensates. So, you know, I can do terrible things to a rig and make it look absolutely hideous, but the creature will still somehow find a way to traverse the terrain. So that meant we knew we could have these shared rigs. So when we're designing creatures, suddenly, again, well, I talk about how we added constraints to ourselves, but we kept doing this where we'd add a constraint and then suddenly the coders would find a way of avoiding that constraint. And we're like, oh, I was quite looking forward to just creating this small set of things, but suddenly it all blew up and we...
You see this little creature up here, this little frog creature? You're probably thinking, we haven't got that little frog creature in-game. You actually see it hopping across a riverbed later in one of the videos that he shows. So some of these creatures that we see here, they did actually have them in game at one point. I mean, look at that beetly type looking one there. That's really gnarly. And this thing, There's a couple of really interesting ones there, and this like little gator one. He talks about swamp biomes and how there's going to be amphibious type creatures on those swamp biomes, which just doesn't happen. He also says, you know, the colder the planet, the more fur they would have. Well, they only really introduced fur in a fairly recent update. But when he talks about fur, it's almost like it was in-game right from the word go. For whatever reason, they dialed that back. There's lots of little nuances and little things that you pick up when you watch this video and you think, hold on. But it's not until you actually pause and give it actual thought. I mean, you could watch this video from end to end and not think much of it and think, yeah, that's the game we got. But if you actually think about it in places and just stop for a moment, there's so much that's not there. I mean, look at all these beaked creatures, aren't they gnarly? It's pretty darn cool. Anyhow, let's press on.
It could be like, oh, it turns out that a warthog can have the same rig as a duck-billed platypus or a frog, which is great because it means we get all this variation, but it's also just, like, as an artist, I'm a complete control freak, and having that kind of power, yeah, I just wanted to get back in my little box and kind of curl up.
Okay, so another question from It's Your Mama. Hey, Cat, is there going to be any plan for the day, or just a meet-up at the pub? No, there is a plan. So when you first arrive there, the kitchen is only open for the first hour. So from 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock, I'm thinking just mingling, chatting, but also ordering your food. Ordering your food as soon as you get a table and you're sitting down. Grab yourself some food as soon as you get there. We're also going to be giving people raffle tickets for free when they come into the venue. So you're going to get one raffle ticket each. And then after food, after 8 o'clock, we're going to do the raffle draw. And because there's going to be quite a few people going up, and whoever gets their raffle ticket drawn, they go up and just choose whatever you want from the table. Do it that way. So you just pick what you want. Okay, so after we've done the raffle draw, I'm thinking pub quiz. So the raffle draw might last half an hour to 40 minutes because there's going to be loads of gifts and loads of people. And then there's going to be a quiz. I think that's going to last for about an hour. Hopefully there's going to be prizes to give out for the quiz. In fact, I've got what I'm going to be doing for the prize for the quiz. I've got a prototype here. I've printed 4 of these right now. I need to have probably about 8 depending on who comes on. Let me just make this a bit bigger for a second. So there you go. That's that might be a quiz prize. Look how cool that is. It says No Man's Sky on the back. But what you can do is, if you do get an Atlas card or something, you can stand it up on there. We might not get given Atlas cards to give away, but this kind of doubles up as an Atlas pass stand as well. And that's actually a golden PLA. I didn't spray paint that. It's plastic, but it looks metal. It's going to look good on a shelf. That's why I put these together. And yeah, so that might be a giveaway prize, depending if I can get my printer to print another 4 yet. And my printer's just started making a squeaking noise today, so I've had to go and buy a load of freaking grease and stuff. I need to grease it up. It's on its last legs. I'm hoping I can make it to make 8. Otherwise, we might fall short slightly. Anyway, back to podcast.
So these were, yeah, I'm just getting ahead of myself. These are like some of the concepts which we kind of created as like, in our blueprint system, when we build like a base template, as I was saying, that base template needs to be really, really good. Otherwise, it's like it is the foundation on which all the generation is built. So if you have a bad template, then all the creatures you create will be bad. So we have to be really careful at the very beginning to plan exactly the kind of variation we want to get from a rig. And this is the whale / shark / water eel, alien, crocodile rig.
Now, I love all those sea creatures. Let me just hop back.
All the generation is built, so if you have a bad template.
But yeah, and then after that quiz, I'm thinking just, get merry and mingle. And then maybe a hunt for a kebab shop and getting back to the hotel room. Right, okay. So these underwater creatures, we've got all these underwater creatures pretty much in-game now. I love the little lights on the actual head of this one. But would it be nice if your ship was about the size of its eye? Maybe the size of the Leviathans, the actual frigates that we've got. If you could find sea creatures of that sort of size that would eat you pretty much in one bite, that would be freaking epic. If there was a mission to go and hunt them given to you by a Viking or something. And maybe you have to go in a fire team to take these things on because they're freaking Goliaths. Like mini boss fights on certain planets. Maybe when you scan the planet, it could say extreme fauna. Like how you get extreme sentinels, and you might not want to land on an extreme sentinel planet. Extreme fauna planets. Please add them in. Tell me a sci-fi book. Tell me a sci-fi movie that doesn't have extreme megafauna. even in the ones like you mentioned, like Journey to the Center of the Earth and things like that, they've all got megafauna. So please make that a thing, and let us fight the frickin' sandworms if we want to. That'll be frickin' epic too. Giant ground fauna, giant sea fauna, and maybe even add some in the air as well that would come down and frickin' take your head off when you're not looking.
Whale slash shark slash water eel alien crocodile rig. And this is a little blue dude. This is our blue creatures, so...
Oh, back to that 3D model just for 1 second, because we've got somebody in the house that makes a few. So back to here. So that little alpha vector in there was somebody else's make. Somebody else made that. But I made the stand. The text there at the back, I found that on the Thingiverse. It's a merger. It's a Frankenstein of things. And because it is just a rehash, I mean, I put in there 2022 meetup as well. But I used Tinkercad. I used Tinkercad to put this all together and make that as a Frankenstein thing. And I'm not going to be putting it back on Thingiverse. This is going to be a one-off just for the event, and they're not for cash. They're being given away. So it's all good. It's all fine. It all fits into the licensing, as long as you guys don't go and sell them afterwards. But it'll come with a caveat. No selling of these things. Yeah, you know. Anyhow, back to podcast.
You have the base template, and it gets skewed. It then selects type of ear, tail, it selects the texture. This is, again, like the tree, just one possible version out of thousands, or however many hundreds of thousands we want. Then it gets skewed.
That's a giraffe. We ain't gonna get that.
Scaling, where you can pick any silhouettes.
Oh.
That's real fun. And this was, like, once we got this system working, it was absolutely amazing, because suddenly we were populating these worlds with, even when we only had a single rig and they were being spawned on every planet, suddenly you were flying down to a planet and I wouldn't know what I was going to see, and it was unpredictable, and I'd never had that before, because as an artist you normally know exactly what you're going to see. And these are like some of the ZBrush, because we have like a system where you can create normal maps that we can blend between, a bit like how some like AAA games, they'll have like wrinkles and things that they can blend on and off. We have a similar thing for like scales or muscle groups. I'm going to show you a little video of the blueprint system on the creatures.
Just got music?
So what you see here is, once again on the left, you've got the variation. We've got the parameters set to be within a small amount, so you'll see when I click view variants, it'll be similar looking creatures. So, you know, the scale is roughly the same size. It's not a million miles away from what was before. But we can change the values, which I'll do in a second, and so yeah, that's a slightly fatter version, but if I change the scale, put it right.
I did notice you don't get to see the Diplos in this thing from the E3 thing, you know. I really wish that they would have gone to town a little more on the Diplos, since they were in the E3 demo. I know I keep banging on about the E3 Diplo, but, you know, it was one of the main draws. I mean, if you spoke to anybody, what's No Man's Sky? They say, oh, that's that game with the giant dinosaurs and the planets, and yeah.
Down, and you'll see a very different looking creature, hopefully. There we go. So that's exactly the same rig, but hopefully you'll also notice it chooses a different animation depending on what type of creature it gets. So you've got a cow, it knows that because it's a heavier creature, it's going to use a slower walk. And if I can tweak the scaling there, so you can see I've made him with really skinny little back legs and really heavy forelegs. But hopefully what it's demonstrating, and you can get robots, you've got to have robots in a sci-fi game. What it's demonstrating is that you're getting an awful lot for very little. It's a shark dude, a little alligator. And the next guy I really like. This is like our unicorn guy, a unicorn whale. And his attack animation, he has like a little happy face. So at this stage we have all those creatures. You're clicking on view variants, you're getting very different looking creatures. With the trees, you're clicking on view variants, you're getting lots of different looking trees and plants, and the terrain. We're talking about those sliders, and each one has a min and max. But, so imagine like you've got a planet, you've clicked on random, basically, it's just picked, you know, that antelope creature, it's picked the unicorn whale, and it's picked pink trees, and it's picked like bluegrass. It's all gonna, well, yeah, I know for a fact it looks absolutely disgusting when you have that, and that's what I'm referring to when I say procedural soup, because if you don't try to control that, you'll end up with a real ugly mess, and I think that is what as artists, we get terrified with procedural stuff because generally you don't have any control, so you're just randomly hoping that the result you get is a pleasing one.
So this is where it comes back to sliders and tying things with the actual planet that the creatures appear on and making the creatures feel believable. I mean, the amount of times I've landed on a frost crystal planet or a frost world to find all the creatures have reptilian type skin. It's like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Or you land on some sort of a lush planet and the creatures look like they're straight off of some sort of gamma radiated planet. So let's hear what he says about that a little, shall we?
So the way we kind of get around this is, again, I wish I could do it all myself, but I work with some really talented guys and girls, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, but there's a lot of back and forth. We work together, we're teamwork, it's always rosy, and there's never any arguments, and we all agree, and we all do what's best for the game. But essentially what happens is, we'd implement a system, we'd load up the game, I would be offended, with my eyes would bleed, and I would then paint over and try to stop whatever was happening. And then what would happen is, whoever I was working with, normally Sean, like I've known Sean for I've worked with him for 7 years now, and we have a very healthy relationship, so we don't mess around. I just say, Sean, let's do shit, let's change this. And what he's really good at is looking at what I've done, and then he makes me a better artist. He says, why have you done this in the paint over? Why have you done that? And
Robo Vader, the next episode will be exactly that. I'm going to be pulling up the Engoodnin of No Man's Sky and doing half. I'm going to do up to the point of release. And we're going to go over all of that and everything that happened. All the news articles, everything that was from the verse. Engoodnin of No Man's Sky done a real good job, the internet historian, of pulling them into one place. I'm going to use that video and do a reaction video just like this, pausing it and talking about it. But that's going to be the next video. That's going to be part 3. So if you haven't already subscribed and hit that notification bell, please do. Because, yeah, that's going to be the next one.
Some artists are really good at knowing what they're doing, whereas I've just always been a little bit more gut-driven. I just do things because I think they look nice. But being a robot man like Sean is, he thinks, why are you doing this? And I think, I don't know, because it looks nice. What he was really good at doing was
Sean impression.
Saying,
Brilliant.
well, oh, so I noticed you've put bushes around the base of that tree, or you've put little rocks and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, of course, that's what you do when you're doing environments and games. And so all he does is, well, why don't we just tweak the environment system so that every time you place a tree, then it does that. And so that's like a really simple example of just like one of the little rules we have is, it's all these tiny little rules and systems that basically make it more likely for the procedural result to be like something I would have painted. Whether that's a good thing or not is for you to decide.
Yes, I love your artwork.
We also have rules when it comes to things like shapes.
Here we go.
We talk about believability, like say like a sort of swamp environment that's been, when the planet's been terraformed, it'll have generated this climate and ecosystem. And again, based on all these nice little universe rules, like how far away from the sun, or just the minerals in the soil, and that's all just like nice little controllable factors. But what happens is, we know that we can tag certain types of leaf and tree and branch as being matching to a climate. So essentially what that means is, on a swamp planet, you will get swamp leaves and swamp branches. That sounds like it's limiting, but it works over a huge number of things. And it means that can also get filtered through to creatures. So in a sort of damp environment, you're going to get these more cold-blooded, sort of waxy, damp-looking creatures. And also some of the color from the environment will leak through to the creatures, so there'll be natural camouflage. And in the same way, we can have the opposite of that, where we can add in props that are complementary, so they'll stand out, and that's when the real fun begins.
See, I don't know whether any of that actually really happens currently. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen one of those little frog creatures ever. And I don't think I've seen anything that looks amphibious appearing on a swamp biome even today. When you go to a swamp planet, you're likely to find something that looks like it belongs on a radioactive planet or even a frost planet. You might find something with fur on a frickin' swamp world. It doesn't really feel right. And that swamp biome looks far better than the swamp biomes we've got now. Please add them back in, Hello Games, please.
And what I love talking to Sean about is how objects get placed on a terrain. And I know for a fact this is something that anyone who's ever worked with procedural generation with a terrain will know exactly what I'm talking about. That when you place objects using noise, humans just know there's something not quite right. And so what we have is like a clumping system. And it means that things get placed in a more pleasing way, which means that like they understand shape, and they will add like a large prop, and they will place medium props and small props, and it will kind of gradiate down. And every environment artist does these kind of things, but setting the rules, it meant we were guaranteed for that kind of thing to happen. Another thing I had to do was, I teach color theory to a robot. I just love that idea. Essentially, it's a bit like having a junior artist when you're working on procedural technology, but it's a junior artist who is like the worst. He's a complete idiot, and like you can't teach him anything, and he just doesn't listen. So you have to be absolutely rigid, and just, it's a bit, I remember I was talking to another guy, and he said that he found that when he did tutorials.
Pardon, Mike, they turned fuzzy in an update, but there are still frogs. Well, when I say frogs, you might get creatures that look a little bit frog-like, but their back legs move independently and they still walk, like so on, When you see a video later, you actually see one and the hind legs are going together, like a frog does, and they jump, a bit like a rabbit's legs, how rabbits move, It's got that sort of movement to it. Well, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've only ever seen creatures in No Man's Sky that sort of do that. I haven't seen the ones that hop along. I mean, yes, we've got bouncing creatures, the blob creatures. We haven't got anything that moves like a frog or moves like a rabbit. But in the video that he shows later, if you watch very closely, there is one that jumps across the planet's surface, and it moves very much like how a frog would move.
As an artist, that it made him realise why he made the decisions he did. And in doing this, I've had a similar experience that there's all sorts of decisions I make that I just did automatically, but in having to implement these rules, it meant that I was understanding why I was doing what I was doing.
Actually, I think who's already played the video. It was on the E3 one, with the diplos with the heads turning. There was a creature that comes out the water there just before the rhino flushes hits the trees. That's actually moving in the way that I suggested.
So we have materials have different palettes. So you'll have which I can define, and so there's no random colors. You can have hue variation, but I can still say, if I want to say dirt is always one color, I can absolutely do that. But obviously in doing that, dirt would then be the same color in the entire universe, and that would be really boring. But it means that I can control things like, I can say what color fur is, and I can say, I want, when you have a creature that has scales, I want the markings to be a complementary color. I want the underside of certain creatures to always be lighter, and it means you don't get this horrible garish mess.
And although that he's mentioned fur a few times, none of the creatures in any of those models have the fur that we have now. The fur on creatures is far greater improved because, well, I didn't see any fur on these creatures, but at least we've got fur now, but that's only on next gen. But it just goes to show that they're thinking of next gen. They're thinking, well, what can we bring into iteration now for the next gen players? It's like inside of the stations, we've got a lot more light reflections going on than previous gen, and inside of the Nexus. So I'm liking the fact that they're thinking that way. And I can't wait to see what maybe PSVR 2 looks like, and maybe future iterations of No Man's Sky going forwards. Because now we've got the Switch version, we've got the Apple version. I'm wondering whether PlayStation 4 and Xbox, the old version of Xbox, I don't know what freaking versions of Xbox, there's a new one because they named them weird stuff, might all get pushed to one side in a roundabout way, and they get one set of updates for those four, whereas next gen and higher grade PCs maybe get some higher specky type stuff to keep No Man's Sky feeling relevant against some of its competitors, which we all want basically.
And I can do the same with trees, and we have a tagging system, so everything is linked together. So the color of the grass, the color of minerals and soil.
Just thinking, that's probably not what we all want. Sorry to talk for everyone. I mean, people that are on older gen consoles and maybe on the Switch are probably thinking, no, we want all bells and whistles. I think Hello Games are going to give you as much as they possibly can. I mean, even when the next gen update came up, you still got a few little bits and bobs, not as much as what next gen got, but I'm fairly sure that soon we might see a branching off where there's a next gen update and a previous gen update that also covers Switch and Apple. and then next gen gets us another swathe of enhancements on top of that. So the next gen is more competitive with next gen, and the reason why I want that to happen, and the reason why I said and that's good for everyone, is because if No Man's Sky continues to evolve, that means that there's still going to be updates, I would imagine, for all versions. So that's good. It keeps it current, it keeps it alive, it keeps it breathing, basically. No Man's Sky isn't going to die or fall a death, because at the end of the day, where's their competition? There isn't any, really. Starfield threatens to be, but I don't think it is. I think it's going to fall by the wayside because it hasn't got the seamless planet travel. I haven't seen too much variance in the fauna as yet. If it's got megafauna, I'll be up for that, but there has been some fairly hostile aliens on the planets. But we'll see where they go with Starfield. It's got my attention, but No Man's Sky it still carries a very special place in my heart, and I don't think I'm going to be putting that controller down, even maybe after Hello Games stop doing anything with No Man's Sky, which I don't think is ever going to happen at this rate, not for the foreseeable anyway.
Will all filter through to like the trees and the props, and it just means it all feels coherent. And this is our view of our little color droids that we send down to every planet, because when you've got this many planets, I can't personally fly down to every single one and decide whether I like the color of the grass or not. So we have these little dudes that fly down, they spit out animated GIFs for me. I can then and it puts it online, so I can then go and
That's so cool.
Look at it at my leisure, and I can click on the image and get a seed value and then fly down. And what it means is I can balance colors like a god from above and tweak them, and then send out my little minions. And all this stuff, all it means is it's a way for me to control the output, and it means I can link things together, and the results are something like I would create myself. And hopefully you can see here, like, we have a tagging system for props, so you can see that the trees in style and color and shape, they kind of match the props, the shapes you see on the ground, and even the creatures, you'll see their markings and the colors, they're all linked to the environment, so everything just feels like it belongs.
We didn't really get bioluminescence on planets for quite some time after launch, but you know, that looks like a bioluminescent planet if I ever did see one. It looks like there's some sort of glowing bugs or something in the sky on this planet as well. And I know in some of the video footage you see this planet moving, and it does look quite bioluminescent and got glowing creatures, which is pretty frickin' cool.
And you can see the sort of clumping system with the complementary colours, where you've got the blue against the orange and you've got the green sky, and objects placed around cave mouths. Like, I haven't placed any of these props, but hopefully it doesn't look too procedural. And we get some really cool bugs. I'm trying to think, the best example I can give is, like, I was fiddling around with this, I wanted to create these little hippos that were spawned in caves, just as like a little experiment. When I say hippos, it just means like a mammal type creature that's within a certain scale. And I know that, and I could set it to have like a bulbous sort of nose. And so I'd done this on my PC, and I thought, cool, that's quite fun, I'll just check it in, and just, you know, we'll decide on it later. And then one of the guys, he'd obviously got latest, and he'd loaded up the game, and he'd gone into an underwater cave. And obviously I forgot that at that stage in time, caves were to say whether they're above water or underwater, so he'd swum around the corner and been, to his surprise, found like 200 hippos just splashing about in the water. And that's the butterfly effect. I can tweak tiny little things, and it has this crazy, crazy effect, which is really scary.
So I like the way that he actually described that, and that's probably why we see so many bugs straight after an update. You know, he didn't expect there to be 200 freaking little hippo creatures appearing in a cave, but even when they've tried it in the offices, they found it. That could have quite easily snuck into freaking iteration. It's like when we got barrels raining from the sky when we blew up a walker. I think they've fixed that now, but yeah, these bugs, they do happen after updates. And that's the butterfly effect for bugs, and he's explained it quite earlier on. They are using their own procedural engine, and things can happen that sort of creep in. So sometimes when I pick up a new update, I'm a little bit forgiving, because I knew that it was a thing from back in GD 2015, where Grant Duncan said that he tried to do something honestly in the way of exploration, which then affected something else and ruined it. It's so easily done by the looks of things. They've got quite a fiddly engine. So hopefully they improve that in future, and hopefully the bugs get reduced, but at least you know now why we get bugs happen.
I'm going to show a final video, which hopefully shows all those things off.
Okay, so this might be the one with the frog in it, actually. Now, I think Sin's Arcade says that he's found one of these frog creatures in-game. Maybe I've just been extremely unlucky and never got to see one. But, you know, I've seen creatures that walk like that, but I don't think I've seen any that move like a rabbit or a frog that actually jump. I love the weather system there, the rain just coming through the trees, and then you come across your ship that's on a giant rock like that. That just looked really nice, didn't it? Even the caves here look pretty darn freaking epic. I like the scanner, how it shows all the individual voxels. And look at that building out there. That was a bit different. Oh, we got a freaking advert. Okay, let's skip advert. There you go. Goodbye, advert man. Look at that building. That was cool. There's a ship that takes off here. Look, it's flying backwards. It looks like it's flying backwards. The ring was at the opposite end to what we have in game right now. There's a sense that I love these sort of industrial environments as well. And that building. And look at those stegosaurs all moving in formation. You see the animation on those stegosaurs? They were great. And what are those freaking monolith things? I really wish they'd had more structures in. And it does look like those frigates or freighters are actually moving as well. There it is. There's the rabbit creature. Hold on 1 second. Let's just jot that back a bit. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, watching down in this area here, you'll see them emerge from some water. And you'd see how they're moving. They're not moving like that. They're hop, skipping and jumping. There they are. Look at them. Look at them. Look at the little gits. Yeah, I see you. Look at that frigates flying in atmosphere. We only just got that. We only just got that in the pirate update. So yeah, all this stuff, everything procedural. I think that was true. I think that was true back in 2015. Now it's procedurally placed. Yes. Freaking assets. Yes, I have lots of questions. Over here, Grant. Questions, lots of them, lots of questions. What did you do? What happened?
So, I've been told to remind people to fill out the little judgment cards, but you can forget if you're going to give me a bad mark. So, but if anyone would like questions, then I think there's a little microphone. I don't know how much time we have. But
cool.
Yes.
In creating all these procedural systems, you talked about creating the art cohesiveness rules.
Yeah.
How did you incorporate things like gameplay concepts like threat level or difficulty or strength or things like that? How did you incorporate those kind of concepts into that same system?
That's good. So we have things like, so the question was, how do we incorporate gameplay elements like threat into a procedural system? And through our tagging system, we can, like when we create like generated props, things like horns and spikes that on things like creatures, then we know like scale values. So if a horn, for example, gets above a certain size, we can say a creature becomes more dangerous. And what it means is when you see a creature, you can kind of predict how dangerous it's going to be just by the way it looks. So like the more ferocious, the larger, and the more spiky a creature is, the more likely to be dangerous it is. But we can also play with that and have like a little fluffy white bunny and have him be really dangerous, but you just don't know.
I wish you would. I wish you would do that a little more and make some really dangerous little cute creature. That'd be nice. Or even like those little blob dudes that pop around. Maybe you can make one that's got like a translucent belly and you can see some poison rippling around in it, and maybe he spits at you if you get too close or something. There is so much potential that you could do with some of these creatures to make them feel more alien and more of a challenge. It looks like his mouth has vanished there. That looks like something out of the Matrix, doesn't it, when the freaking agent gets him.
I had a couple questions about your production pipeline, like for your art assets, because it's kind of really unique. So when you guys were doing R&D for your proceduralism and all the different things that you guys were trying out, so you guys have multiple rigs, you have multiple geometries?
Yes, we can.
And so do you guys, how much do you guys rely on like blend shapes and morph targets? Like you guys blend in different normal maps. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have. The thing with procedural systems is you almost want to have as much flexibility as possible. So we do have entirely generated systems where the artist has no control, and things like UVs are automatically generated and textures are automatically applied. But what we do is if the result isn't good enough, that's when we'll start adding in handmade assets. And like you were saying, we have blend shapes, and because we have bone scaling and bone positioning, it means we don't actually have to have too much different geometry because it just kind of works by pulling it around.
I don't know how many of you out there have seen this, but the cat-like creatures have got 6 legs, where the front legs morph into the second set of legs, and they just don't actually look like they're cohesive. They don't look like that. So this whole thing about moving the skeleton structure of the fauna, I don't think happens as much as what used to happen in GDC 2015. It's like he said, he could morph the actual creature to look hideous, but the XI system, or whatever he called it earlier, will compensate and it'll still be able to scale around the planet. I haven't seen anything as hideous as what that might actually produce. But even the 6-legged creatures, they don't look great, do they? They're all over the freaking shop.
And with normal maps, we create as many different ones as we want for like a creature, and often that's just things like muscular or bulbous, and we can blend between those, or scaly, and we found you don't actually need to create that many to get the variation, but the more we do, the better it becomes. Is that cool? Thanks. Hi. Oh, sorry, what? Oh, time's up, sorry. If you want to ask me more questions, I'll be in room 2002. We can chat there if you want. Cool, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, I will. Okay.
Well, that was brilliant. That was freaking awesome, wasn't it? But it does open up a lot of questions. It opens up a lot of questions for me. And I'm hoping to answer some of those questions myself by watching the Engoodening of No Man's Sky. Sins Arcade just dropped me 10 freaking US$. Thank you, Sins Arcade. I saw Wolfie dropped a link to your channel earlier, so be sure to check out Sins Arcade inside of the actual chat right now, people. That'd be freaking awesome. So thank you very much. Thank you for your content and streams. Discussions like this are great for the community and allow for civil discussion. Fly safe, Captain 07. Well, totally, Sins Arcade. Thank you very much. And there's a reason why I'm doing these videos now. Is I'm thinking if it's coming out to Apple, it's also coming out to Switch. It's nice to reflect on what was the vision of No Man's Sky back in 2015 and what might still be coming over from those original visions into current iteration. I mean, we're seeing so much come into those iterations, even just from some of these gnarly pictures, maybe the ring planets. They weren't there at launch, they're there now. So there's a lot of stuff that you can see in here that they still use as inspiration. They've still got this artwork on the walls inside their studio, you would like to hope. So maybe they're like, oh, we haven't put that in yet. Well, let's start working on that. You know, and Hello Games and Sean Murray have already said that they've still got a long list of stranger and stranger things to add into the verse. So I can only but hope that some of those stranger things are still some of the original inspiration and still some of their original ideas. The questions that I've got that I'm hoping to sort of give answers to in the next episode is what happened to super biomes, what happened to the super formula, and what maybe caused the delays for No Man's Sky in hitting the actual player base, and why does it look so different to what we saw in 2015 to what actually launched in 2016 in such a small space and window. So yeah, the next video is going to be the Engoodening of No Man's Sky by Internet Historian, if that's the same guy and same video. I hope it is. But we're going to be watching the first half. We're going to be watching the first half up to launch, what we've seen so far. Then I plan to do a couple of videos of 2017 after launch, and where we are at current day maybe as well from recent interviews. But there we go. I'm really enjoying putting this video series together. I hope you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. I tend to do these around weekends, as long as we're not out and about, because me and Ivy do have a social life as well. So there's no time scale on these. It's just easy. It's just as and when I can. All right, people, that in the viewerverse. Take care. I'm also off this week coming, so I might be able to sneak in another one during the week if I get a free day to myself, which I think actually tomorrow Ivy's working. I'm off all day. So I might do it tomorrow. So yeah, might do it. Might do it tomorrow. All right, people, take care. Goodbye. See you later.